We talk a lot about the moves the Pacers made on this podcast. What moves other teams made are really going to impact the Pacers this coming season and even beyond that, whether that's on the court or in the draft. We'll get to it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, y'all? Happy Friday. Congrats. You made it through the week and welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today we are diving into other moves, not Pacers-related moves. We spent all summer talking about the Pacers re-signing their guys, getting James Wiseman, getting Cole Swider, and we'll get back to that stuff. But today I want to look at stuff other teams did that's going to matter for the Pacers, whether it's division rivals, teams the Pacers will play all the time. What's the outlook for those games like now? Whether it's conference teams, Pacers might have to worry about them in the playoffs. How do they look now? And of course, stuff that I think about too much, the draft. Teams that the Pacers are thinking about for the draft this year and beyond. What did they do? What is their timeline? How is that all updated? And what does it mean? What were the Pacers keeping an eye on and circling as important moves? We'll talk about all of that stuff today. And at the end, if we have a little bit of time, just going to opine on some moves I liked. Why not? Let's start with the division, the Central Division. Why? Because it's a lot of games for the Pacers. 16 games, right? They play all the teams in the division 4 times. They play some other East teams 4 times too, but that's almost 20% of their season is just against the Central Division. And every year for the last couple, there's been 2-ish bad teams in the division now. For a couple of years, it was the Pacers. Right now, it looks like it's trending that way again. But I actually want to start with the Bucks. The Bucks are the most interesting team to me to talk about when it comes to moves that were made and not just looking at the division teams, because the Bucks, they got a little bit better. Let's start with what they did. For those who don't know, the Pacers played the Bucks. The Bucks got Taurean Prince, they got Gary Trent Jr., and they got DeLon Wright, and they did that all on minimum contracts. And those 3, in theory, would replace Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, and Jay Crowder in the rotation. So if you say DeLon Wright instead of Patrick Beverley, that's an upgrade. And Gary Trent instead of Malik Beasley, that's certainly an upgrade. And Taurean Prince instead of Jay Crowder, that's an upgrade. Like, that's impressive with only minimums. Plus, they kept all their draft picks, and they're better in that way. They got good players in with absolutely no resources to actually do that, right? That's good for the Bucks. So they should be a little better because of that. How much that offsets the fact that they're an aging team, right? Like, literally everybody I just said will be 30 by the end of the year. It will kind of define their season. I don't really care about how good they are. What I want to talk about is how those moves impact the Pacers specifically, because if the aging curve is normal, the headliner is the Bucks will be a better team, just straight up, right? Gary Trent fits them very well. They got defenders, they got size, they just have better rotational depth, which is going to matter a lot after Damon Doc in an offseason. But to me, why this one matters a lot is the Pacers torched the Bucks last year a million times, right? They played 5 times in the regular season, 6 times in the playoffs, 11 total. Pacers won 8 of them, right? 2 playoff losses and 1 regular season loss. That was a dominant series, 8-3 last year, right? And a big part of that was the Bucks perimeter defense stunk. And the Pacers almost every game, in fact, basically every game, would have a guard, at least one, often more than one, do well. Mathurin did well almost every game against the Bucks. TJ McConnell played well against them. Haliburton played well against them in the playoffs. Haliburton had some stinkers and then resurged in a huge way and played well against them. McConnell was good against them once he got going in the playoffs after starting slow, right? So, like, the biggest problem for them was their perimeter defense. They would give up too much pressure. They rotate a lot. It didn't work. Even when they switched coaches, that was the case. And the Pacers' transition attack really punished the Bucks. Their transition defense stunk. Well, their moves, one, getting Doc Rivers during last season, and their 3 offseason additions all help with that, right? Taurean Prince might play the 3 for them. Like, he's got size. He was on the Lakers team that gave the Pacers trouble because of their size last year. DeLon Wright's a good perimeter defender. That's been his hallmark trait in the NBA. Gary Trent wasn't last year a good defender for the Raptors, but has been a good defender or okay enough defender in the past for other teams and can shoot it. So I still think the tempo advantage the Pacers have is going to be significant against Milwaukee. That team's still older, but I think that the matchup problems the Pacers caused are neutralized a bit. They're lessened. And I think the Bucks will be a harder team for the Pacers to take down this year because of those moves. They're all smaller moves, get some vets in, but I think that that's going to matter in a major way for a team the Pacers play 4 times at least. Could be more if somehow they both reach the in-season tournament quarterfinals. The Cavs haven't done anything at all. I mean that sincerely. You might think I'm kidding. Like they added, I forget who on a two-way. One of the South Sudan players was JT Thor. They had JT Thor on a two-way, and that's their only new player via free agency. They drafted Jalen Tyson, and the rest of their team is exactly the same. They changed head coaches. Kenny Atkinson, I don't know what to make of that. I think Kenny Atkinson's a good development coach. We'll see what he can do with a winning team. I would say they're about the same level of opponent as the Pacers, but no moves there that impact the team. We're not going to run through every team. I will for the division, but I will not do that in every segment. So nothing really to talk about with the Cavs. The Bulls and Pistons, though, made some moves, and I think they're both worth talking about in a little more depth, just like we just did with the Bucks. Let's start with the Bulls. The Bulls went 3-1 against the Pacers last year. Probably the worst Pacers result against a single opponent. Maybe you could say getting swept by Portland in terms of like a full season series worth of results. And the Bulls had this like aggressive up high defense, and they did just enough offensively where DeRozan could get wherever he wanted, and Drummond dominated the glass, and all this stuff worked really well. It was really, it shouldn't have been as tough for the Pacers to beat the Bulls as it was, but it was. They struggled with Chicago. And now the Bulls are doing something different. Sounds like from some on the record comments from their leadership that like they're trying to be okay, I guess. They still have Zach LaVine and Nikola Vucevic, but they kind of can't be okay. They're getting younger. It's weird in between. They need to commit to one of those two directions, regardless of what they're doing. Specifically this summer, the moves the Bulls made them a much easier opponent for the Pacers for two reasons. One, they got worse, right? They know, just headline, they don't have DeRozan anymore, right? He's not on the team. They don't have Alex Caruso anymore. They don't have Andre Drummond anymore, right? They're worse. They replaced those players with Josh Giddey, Jalen Smith, and did they even replace DeRozan? I guess you could say Chris Duarte. They got back in that trade, right? They're worse. They're a worse team. That's 2x Pacers, funnily enough. So that is the Pacers should not lose 3 times to the Bulls this year, right? But more specifically, this one's kind of the inverse of what we just talked about with the Bucks. The stuff the Pacers stunk against the Bulls, right? Caruso could guard Haliburton, and he did a very good job. One of the best Haliburton defenders in the NBA, right? Gone. Not a thing anymore. Drummond killed the Pacers on the offensive glass. He killed a lot of teams on the offensive glass, but specifically the Pacers too, who aren't good at rebounding. He crushed them on the offensive glass. And DeRozan, for the last lots of years, Raptors playoffs, one-legged game winners, missing free throws, and then scoring on an inbound. He's just killed the Pacers for years. Clutch moments, big shots, crazy threes, right? He's gone. He's not on the team anymore. So the 3 things that specifically have given the Pacers the most thorns on the Bulls are gone. And so the Bulls are worse and are matchup less effective against the Pacers. So I think on balance, you'd say anything that is taken away from the Pacers from a win column perspective from the Milwaukee comes back via Chicago, right? That's going to come out in the wash to me at worst. But we'll see what the Bulls end up doing. It feels like they could be right for a move to be even worse than they are now at some point this season. We'll see how that checks out. The Pistons are fascinating to me. People talk a lot about a team's additions when they make additions, as they should. And the Pistons added Tobias Harris. These moves are going to impact the Pacers. They played the Pistons 4 times. They added Malik Beasley. They added Paul Reed. I couldn't remember the waiver claim. They sent someone else of somewhat significance. They kept Simone Fontecchio. I'm missing someone else that was like decent that they signed. I'll get there in a second. But either way, they added those players, and those are good players, right? They'll be a more professional team around Cade, around Durant, around Ivy. They also drafted Ron Holland. Okay. They still have Marcus Sasser. All this stuff. I'm not going to review everything the Pistons have done. They're just kind of confusing to me because they have kind of decisions to make where someone important's not going to play, whether that's a good, like a vet or a young player, right? But adding Harris, adding Beasley, and why can't I remember the other player that they brought in this summer? Either way, they have vets now. That's good. But I think the thing that's not talked about enough when teams acquire vets is not only are they playing Tim Hardaway Jr., that's who it was, they got him from the Mavs. It's that they're replacing someone else who maybe wasn't as good that's now not playing, right? Like Chimezie Metu, Troy Brown, Evan Fournier, even Wiseman, who's now with the Pacers, Malachi Flynn, right? They upgraded on a lot of those spots by getting these vets. So not only are you taking away some negatives, you're adding some potential positives. So the Pistons should be better. Cade's going to be better. Duran's going to be better. Now, they sucked last year, right? They won 14 games. So they're probably still a sub-30 win team unless they get a big jump from their young guys. They're not good. The Pacers should still do very well against the Pistons. But sweeping them will be hard this year, right? That will not be an easy thing to do. And I think that's why they added like serious real players that are going to make them fascinating. But when the Pacers play, the Pistons will matter because, like I said, they have Cade, they have Jaden Ivey, they have Duren, they drafted Rob Holland, they drafted Bobby Klintman early in the second round, they drafted Asar Thompson last year, they have Marcus Sasser, they got Wendell Moore from the Timberwolves. He was a first round pick 2 years ago. He shouldn't be in their plans, but he was. Like, I just named 8 young guys. I didn't even say, and none of those young guys I said were Simone Fontecchio, Malik Beasley, anyone that they got this summer. It's like someone's not going to play, whether that's a young guy or a recent addition. And so what are the Pistons going to be? Are they going to be a young team trying to get better long term? Are they going to be a team trying to get more wins this year? Given how bad they've been, I kind of understand both from an organizational perspective. So the moves they made that impact the Pacers, they added talent and they got rid of not good talent, right? And so I think in the division, the moves made by teams there that impact the Pacers, the Bucks added talent, got better. The Pistons added talent and lost non-talent. They got better, and the Bulls got a lot worse in a way that directly helps the Pacers. Let's go to the big picture East stuff, specifically with teams, especially on the Pacers competing timeline, the Knicks, the Sixers, the Heat. What did they do that impacts the Pacers? Before we dive into that, we need to talk about FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel here. They're America's #1 sportsbook. Well, got a little something different for you now. Right now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's until the 22nd of September. So the regular season will have started by then. Colts preseason's done. They beat the Bengals. They're about to get going. And with a YouTube TV baseball, you'll be able to watch every single regular season Sunday out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment. You can cancel anytime. So that's hop in on FanDuel and bet $5 for a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket on FanDuel.com/lockedon to download America's #1 sportsbook. And we're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day. Nothing at all going on in the NBA. This is about as dead as it really gets in terms of teams and stuff happening. So not a lot of stuff, but I just heard Cam Thomas on a podcast. So check out Locked On Nets. Hear about the Nets. They're very confusing to me. We'll talk about them for like 2 seconds later on this episode. But I need to learn more about the Nets, so I listen to Locked On Nets because I don't get it. Looking in the East, the conference, and specifically I think the moves the Pacers care about is what do the other good teams do, right? With absolutely no offense to the Nets or the Raptors or the whoever. Like, they'll matter to the Pacers at some point. They're trying to get better. But right now they're not very good, and they're probably not going to compete this year. So the Pacers care what they do, but they're not. It doesn't directly impact what you're about to see this season for the Pacers' fortunes, for that team fortunes. But what did happen is a lot of teams got loaded up better. Not like a little better, like loaded up better. The Knicks, of course, did a ton of stuff, right? The Knicks got Mikal Bridges in a big trade. That's going to be huge for them. They now have an incredibly high top-end group with Anunoby and Bridges and Brunson. They got Keita Bates-Diop. He might end up playing for them. They drafted 2 players. Tyler Kolek looks really good in Summer League. They have campaign to back things up now. Now, they should be better. I think people are not talking enough about losing Hardenstein. That's going to be huge for them, but they lost Alec Burks. Okay, he was not in the rotation. They were healthy. They lost Bojan, who was the last player in the rotation when healthy, and that's it in terms of rotation guys besides Hardenstein. So can they make that up with Mitchell Robinson and whoever their backup is? Looks like it'll be Achua, probably, given that they got other talent. So I think they're going to be really good. Mikal Bridges is going to help them a ton. Nova vibes, shoot threes, guard. And he's not even going to be guarding the best player. Anunoby probably will be, and he'll probably be guarding the second best player. That's crazy, right? That is ridiculous how good of a defensive lineup they're about to have. If Hart starts 2, Hart guarding the third best player, good luck scoring against the New York Knicks this season. I love the move they made. They paid a lot to do it, but they have a real window here to be good and make the conference finals and push whoever they're playing. So love what the Knicks did, and the Pacers, who beat them last year, but without Anunoby and with some other injuries, are probably going, okay, they're better. They're a team we're gonna have to keep an eye on and see if we can catch this season if we're as good as them, right? I think again the Hardenstein loss could hurt them, or if not, when do we need to load up to really keep up with them, right? That's what the Pacers have to be thinking after seeing what the Knicks did. Mikal Bridges, crazy trade. They're gonna have to pay him pretty soon, and that's when the things will change for the Knicks when they have to pay Bridges. But for now, they look really good. and they're going to be a fun watch. I really like what the Knicks team is. The Magic are an interesting one. The Magic finished with the same record as the Pacers last year, but owned the tiebreaker because they won 2 games. They have a lot of the same team, but they did a great job to keep their flexibility open, keep their cap space open, and they got Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, as Tim McMahon calls him. KCP stands for Keep Championship Players. He's got one with the Lakers. He's got one with the Nuggets. He's a great 3-and-D player. Perfect fit for the Orlando Magic. And for the Pacers specifically, similar to Bridges, a tough thing to see happen because that team was already a good defensive team and a great defensive team with size against the Pacers. Not even more. They have another player with size to throw at the Pacers. Same like Mikal Bridges with the Knicks. I keep just talking about what the teams did and not forgetting to do like oh yeah, this guy's going to guard Tyrese Haliburton, right? So like Mikal Bridges is going to guard Haliburton, and OG Anunoby's on Siakam. Like that's like as good as it gets. For the Magic, KCP now could potentially take the Haliburton assignment. He's not really that kind of defender, but he can do a good enough job there. Maybe Jalen Suggs does it, but either way, they have pests in the backcourt now to go with their size. That's already great there with what they got out of Goga last year, with what they get out of Jonathan Isaac, with what they get out of Wendell Carter and Banchero and Wagner, obviously. So they are going to be nasty on defense. They already were pretty good. Now they're going to be really good. And they got a shooter who fits. He is a great fit. And another team that has matchup challenges added against the Pacers. Like they could very easily just do Suggs on Nembhard and KCP on Nembhard and Suggs on Haliburton and give the Pacers a ton of trouble. And they have the size to guard Siakam decently well as well. So love what the Magic did. I think they're going to be pretty good. They won the same number of games as the Pacers, but it's very similar, right? They're hoping their addition and internal development can make them much better. The Pacers will hope 41 games of Siakam and internal development can make them much better. I'll explain more on that in the third segment, what I mean there. But the Magic, right by the Pacers in the standings last year, they got better. And the Sixers, of course, ex-Pacer Paul George among their many additions, Caleb Martin, Andre Drummond, Reggie Jackson, Kyle Lowry's back. There's a lot. They're a good team in the Pacers tier in the East. Pacers, remember, same record as the Sixers last year. They both had 47, but the Pacers had that tiebreaker, which is how they got 6th, right? So if the Sixers have health from Joel Embiid or Paul George fits, like they might have the best top 3 in the league. That's really good. Maxey, PG, and Embiid is really good. I'll be fascinated to see what that team looks like. But now with PG, again, same kind of deal. Another defender to put on someone else for the Pacers. He might end up guarding Siakam in that matchup. Who knows? But that's still helpful, right? It's still a helpful tool for them to have. Caleb Martin can guard, right? They added players that are really good and complementary. And so that's a tougher team for the Pacers to catch. Everyone who's freaking out about all these standings predictions saying, the Pacers are going to finish 7th. Adam and I did our predictions. We have them in the high 40s, higher than most people do. But like, is 7th that insane? They finished 6th last year, and the team right behind them got way better, right? So we'll see how it actually comes together. But I love what the Sixers did because they got a star who fits anywhere and specifically fits with their stars. And the role players they added are really good too. And from a Pacers perspective, if the Sixers are better, that stings, right? That's a team you have to hold off for a playoff berth, and they're better against the Pacers, right? It's not getting better, but it doesn't really matter in that matchup. So of the top 8 in the East, right? The Celtics are amazing, but the Bucks a little better, the Sixers way better, the Knicks way better, the Magic way better. The Cavs changed coaches and probably think they're better, so that leaves the Celtics not doing much because who cares? They're so good. And the Heat, we'll talk about the Heat later, but they're the only one in the top 8 of the East that didn't do something that made you go, "Whoa, they're much better." So the top is going to be tight again. The Pacers are going to be in this. I'm making this up like 3 through 7 race, 3 through 8 race. And so all these moves really matter because of that, right? Even with the specific matchup with the Pacers, it all will matter. But every win's going to be important. These teams being better and being able to win more games is going to make those races even tougher. So lots of moves that matter in the East. But I think the Magic, the Knicks, and the Sixers, and the big moves that they made stand out the most. If the Heat did anything of major significance, it would have made this segment. If any other team was trying to be more than a play-in team, that would matter too. If the Cavs end up doing something with a core via a sign and trade, that will be a very big deal for the Pacers. But in the East specifically, ironically, a lot of the bigger moves came in the Pacers division. Teams they'll play the most. But the biggest moves, Mikal Bridges, etc., are in New York. And we'll see how those teams match up with the Pacers. But it looks like they're built very well to stop the Pacers. Last segment here, I want to talk about draft picks. So teams that Pacers own their pick, what did they do this summer? So that's obviously direct impact. And also some moves I just liked because I'm going to have time to do it. And I like talking about transactions I liked. Before we do that, though, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. When your schedule is packed with stuff, kids, activities, big work projects, and more, it is easy to let your priorities slip. Even when we know what makes us happy, it's hard to make time for it. But when you feel like you have no time for yourself, non-negotiables like therapy are more important than ever. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills or learning to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. Therapy is not just for those who've experienced major trauma. So if you've been thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. So never skip therapy day with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. We're back here on Locked On Pacers. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day for your second listen. Listen to any of these teams we talked about to hear what they think, about the East. I think the Locked On Heat does a good job all the time, and they've had some interesting offseason topics. So Wes Goldberg, David Ramel, check them out. You're going to hear Wes on this podcast in the not too distant future, depending on how scheduling works out. A couple other things I want to touch on. Pacers draft picks next year, 2025. They have their own first. That's it in terms of first. The second round, they have their own second. They also have two more, kind of. So here's this deal. This is about as unfun as it gets. The Pacers have a 2025 second-round draft pick from the Charlotte Hornets, but they actually don't. It's a fake second. Charlotte's 2025 second-round pick to the Pacers is protected for selections 31 through 55, meaning if the Hornets pick is in the first 25 picks of the second round, they keep it. If not, it goes to the Pacers. Charlotte traded that to Golden State a while ago. I probably cap relief. They had to send something back. And the Warriors sent it to the Pacers again. And if only you got to send something back, trade back in February. So if the Hornets went crazy this offseason and built a team that was going to be one of the 5 best in the NBA, that would have been awesome. The Pacers could have got a second-round pick out of that. That did not happen. So moves that impact the Pacers, the Hornets in action. What were they thinking? I'm joking. They couldn't have gotten to being one of the top 5 best teams in the league. A lot would have to go right. But that does matter for the Pacers. What they did do in the direction they've chosen really over the last couple of years, their Pacers probably not going to see that pick ever. It immediately, that obligation is extinguished. That pick would never come to the Pacers. The other second round of the Pacers could have comes from the Heat. Miami's 2025 second round pick to the Pacers, protected for selections 38 through 59, to the opposite of what we just said. If the Heat's pick is 38 through 59, it goes to the Nets. If it's 31 through 37, it goes to the Pacers. Very fascinating. I forget the trades that these were initially part of. I think this one started in the TJ Warren trade and then got changed a little bit in the Edmund Sumner salary dump, if I'm correct, looking back through my notes of transactions. But either way, the Heat would have to have one of the worst 7 records in the NBA for the Pacers to get this second rounder. And so their offseason, had there been some flums with a Jimmy Butler extension, or they had, whatever, maybe that would have been possible. Didn't happen, right? The Heat didn't do a lot of positive stuff in terms of getting a lot better, but they didn't not do that. So in terms of the Pacers having a 2025 second rounder, looks like they'll just have their own, unless the Hornets are a top 5 team or the Heat are a bottom 7 team, both of which seem unlikely. They already seemed unlikely heading into the offseason. And now, given what we've seen so far, that also seems extremely unlikely. The rest of the Pacers' future seconds, 2027 Utah status quo, seems like they'll be better in 2027 than they are now. 2028 from Dallas seems like they'll be good for a while with Luka Doncic. 2029 Pacers second rounder from Portland should be better in 2029 than they are now. And they did not. What I mean when I say this is, like, the Jazz didn't do anything this summer to make you think that their 2027 second rounder coming to the Pacers will be better. Right. Same with Dallas. That 2028 second round pick. There's nothing that makes me think right now that it'll be better than it was before the offseason started. Same with Portland. 2029 Pacers have a second rounder from the Wizards. Kind of, it could be a swap, but whatever. Same thing. They should be better than they are now. They didn't jeopardize that. They have 2 second rounders, the Pacers do, that are interesting, that weren't really impacted this summer, but are still the most ones to me. One is the biggest one, the 2028 Phoenix Suns second rounder could be coming to the Pacers. That all started in the Pacers, Suns, Wizards trade from last draft, a.k.a. the Jarris Walker trade. One of the second rounders the Pacers got in that trade to move back 1 spot. And then they used it as a swap in the Obi Toppin trade. So The Pacers could have the Suns second rounder in 2028. They get the best of their pick and the Suns pick. And the Suns did not do anything to make me think they'll be rebuilding by then. So if the Suns can hold off for 3 years and have a good 2028 pick, hey, you know what? Good for them. But I don't know if they can, right? Their contract timeline, their ability timeline, their financial timeline suggests that by 2028, the Suns might not be very good. Well, they certainly could get a lot back for a lot of their stars via trade. So we'll see, obviously. But until the Suns rebuild starts, I think that's probably the best asset the Pacers have in terms of a second round pick that's tradable. They also have a 2030 Kings second rounder they got in the the Chris Duarte trade last year. The Kings are kind of similar in that, who knows with Sabonis and Fox what's going to be happening in 6 years, but they didn't do anything to make me think their long-term sustainability is any stronger. So those two seem like potentially valuable picks, but no real changes on the draft front, I would say, for the Pacers, except for I'm just going to keep an eye on the Suns. I mean, we're talking about a second round pick 4 years from now, but I mean, for the Pacers who don't have any pick in the 2026 draft, right? They traded their first in the Siakam trade, obviously. Their second went out in a million things. I think the first time they traded it was for Kendall Brown in 2022 second round draft, right? So if they're out of the 2026 draft completely, like, could you trade one of your extra? If you get a 2025 extra second, you could trade it to move into the draft. Or if this 2028 pick gets you into the top 42-ish or something, you maybe could do that, right? So that's why I track all this stuff so much. Maybe not even necessarily for that pick itself, but for what it could allow the Pacers to do via trade or in other drafts, like 2026 specifically, where they don't currently have a pick. That is all the stuff in terms of moves that I think, especially of significance, that impact the Pacers. Lots of teams that were within 2 wins of the Pacers last year. Lots of teams in the East got worse, but they were already worse than the Pacers. The draft stuff didn't change that much. The conference stuff, Philly and New York lead the way on the big changes. But the division should be, I would say, a little easier on average for the Pacers. Now, about 2 minutes left. Stuff I liked and did not like from the summer. Loved the Warriors offseason. The way they were able to pivot out of Clay and get a lot of good players using exceptions from that, and also getting Melton being the only team to use the non-tax pyramid level. That's good stuff. Not enough around Curry. They probably needed to go get a star, but I like what they did. I think they upped the value of their team and the value of the pieces that they have without a lot of wiggle room to actually do that. I think the Houston Rockets are going to be really good. I think they have done a good job keeping the powder dry and adding the right vets at the right moments, and they have a lot of young guys who are interesting and good to me. They got another one in Reed Shepherd. Love what the Rockets have done. The last couple of years, they've gotten pretty good lottery luck, and they've done a good job with it. And they love their young guys. They look like pretty primed. They had a good summer as well. And the offseason I didn't like, besides Denver's, what are you doing? Why are you just losing KCP for nothing? I'm confused by 2 teams. The Nets, they're in action. What's going on? They don't have a lot they can do, but like Dennis Schroeder, Cam Johnson, Nick Claxton, lots of good players. Okay, yeah, keep your good players, but like, for what? They're trying to not win, clearly, or else they wouldn't have traded for their own first in a different trade. So what are they going to do with these vets? What's this team going to look like, right? That's why I thought the Zaire Williams trade they made a lot of sense. They got a young wing. Do more of that. Do more of that if you're the Nets, because currently they're just such an odd motley crew that I don't get it. I'm also confused by the Cavs. They made a coaching change and did nothing. They still have open roster spots. I get that Isaac Okoro's hanging out there. They drafted Luke Travers a few years ago. Sounds like he might be coming over. He's released from his Australia team. You don't come here for Cavs info, but they haven't signed anybody, right? They just got their first external free agent with JT Thor, right? Other than that, it's been re-sign your own guys and extend your own guys. There's no ability to that. They still have trade value. It's not like a disaster offseason for the Cavs. I'm just confused. What do they want to be? Can they be better with the group that they have? Are they really relying on Jalen Tyson to give them a boost? Maybe internal development matters. They've got some young guys. And Kenny Atkinson can develop a team, but very confused by the Cavs. That is it for this transactionally focused show. Feel like we've covered basically every angle of free agency for the Pacers over the last couple months. Next Monday, we'll be talking about new Pacers players with people who've covered them before. Next week, we'll do What Are the Odds? We'll do fun lineups, all sorts of good stuff coming here on the Locked On Pacers podcast, even at this point, this deep into the month of August. Happy with what we've been able to do on the show. If you guys want to hear about anything, let me know. I'm at that point of the summer where I will take segment requests. If not, back on Monday, talking new Pacers players, deep diving into them with people who've covered them before. Till then, everybody, have a wonderful weekend.